A very good evening to all my dear students. I am CA Nancy Singla and I welcome you all to today's session for the auditing and assurance subject. Students, I can see that many of you have already joined. Hitesh, Pooja, Subhanshu, Annie, Millie, Radhika, Menon, Sushil and Astha. A very good evening to all of you. So students, I hope you all are taking full advantage of these sessions, of these live sessions which have been organized by our institute, right? And today is the chance for you all to take advantage of my session on chapter number 4, which is risk assessment and internal control. Okay? So before starting with this chapter, a very humble request that please listen to the lecture with concentration. Keep on posting your queries and try to make this session interactive, right? So I can see Sonika, Rachna and Akshay, they have also joined. So students, so far you have already covered 3 chapters of this subject, chapter number 1, 2 and 3. And I hope that you all have understood various concepts that have been covered. Like in your chapter number 1, you have done nature, objective, scope of audit along with various inherent limitations of audit, right? Then chapter number 2, you have done audit plan, audit strategy, essay 320 about materiality, remember? And in chapter number 3, you all have done all the essays, you all have covered the essays relating to audit evidence, okay? So for all those who have actually taken advantage of these sessions and have actually gone through the ICI module now, so I'm sure that as and when I was, telling you the various topics of chapter number 1, 2 and 3, the module must have come in front of your eyes, right? So quickly send in your replies whether you all have actually taken full advantage of these sessions or not. So now we'll be starting with today's chapter, which is chapter number 4, risk assessment and internal control, right? So students, before starting the first topic of this chapter now, let us just have a look at the name of this chapter. We will try to understand the name of this chapter and why we are studying risk assessment and internal control. So many of you are saying, yes, ma'am, we have taken full advantage. We are taking full advantage of these sessions like Sonika, Hitesh, Rachna, Hirpal, Annie, Manoj. That's good. That's very good. And in fact, you should take the advantage of these sessions. Okay? So the name of the chapter is what? Risk assessment and internal control. Okay? So today we will be discussing about risk assessment. Risk assessment. Okay? So my first question to you people, quickly tell me, quickly send in your replies as to what do you understand by the term risk. Quickly send in your replies. And students are saying, Sonika is saying that she is very thankful for this initiative by our institute. That is very good, Sonika. These classes are for your help only. Okay, my question, what is meant by risk? Hana? Any synonym or whatever meaning comes to your mind, I need answers. 30 seconds ke liye I'll wait, then I'll start. So I have received the answer, possibility of misstatement. Risk is like possible threat, fear of giving a wrong opinion, okay? Any event result in negative consequences, okay? So students, if we talk about the dictionary meaning of term risk, so it simply means a situation involving exposure to danger or something unpleasant. I'll read it again. A situation involving exposure to danger or something unpleasant. See, there are a number of risks. Business risks are there, security risks are there, health risks are there. So different type of risks are there. And today we'll be discussing about various risks that are associated with the audit of financial statements. Okay? So risk kya hota hai? It is basically used in a negative sense. Something dangerous, something unpleasant, so something negative. Correct? Okay? And the second word, what is the second word? Assessment. What is meant by assessment? Send in your replies quickly. Okay. Now students, send in your replies with respect to term assessment. What is meant by term assessment? So I can see a number of you are sending in your replies. Tanishk, what is your question? Please send it again. Tanishk, your question will be answered at the end of the session. Okay. So Karthik is saying assessment means evaluating, which is absolutely correct. Hitesh said it means to evaluate and then measurement. Okay. So I can say assessment is the action of assessing or evaluating or estimating something. It is the action of evaluating, estimated something. Anuman lagana. If I give a Hindi word to this is anuman lagana. So what is risk assessment? Risk ko assess karna, to evaluate, to estimate risk. Okay? Now in terms of audit of financial statement, students, today we'll be discussing as to why an auditor will be assessing the risk when he's conducting the audit of the financial statement. Where is it mentioned that the auditor needs to identify and he needs to assess some risk? Okay? So we'll be discussing about various kind of risks today. Okay? So risk, abhi we have understood that it is something negative, something unpleasant, and assessment is evaluating, estimating. So when we as auditor, we assess such risk with respect to audit of financial statement, this is called what? Risk assessment. Okay. Now, my another question to you is, quickly tell me, why an auditor is required to assess the risk when he is auditing the financial statements of his client? Before starting the audit, the auditor will assess what kind of risk is associated with the financial statements of the client, what kind of risk is associated with the internal controls of the client. Why? So why is the auditor identifying and assessing the risk? What is audit risk, what is detection risk, and various other kinds of risk, inherent risk, control risk, risk of material misstatement, everything will be clear to you by the end of this session. So please concentrate on my question to you. That is why an auditor identifies and assesses the risk associated with the financial statements. So students are saying, Ayush is saying, so that his opinion may be expressed as appropriate. Hitesh is saying to minimize the mistakes or threat to financial statement. Okay. So dekho, students, I'm saying that before starting the audit work, auditor is assessing the risk. During the audit also risk assessment will be there. But before starting the audit, auditor will assess why? So that based on his assessment of the risk, with respect to the financial statement of this particular client, this much is the risk, he can plan his work. Just try to understand, if the risk associated with a particular financial statement is high, quickly tell me will the auditor decide to increase his work or decrease his work? If the risk associated with the financial statement that the auditor is going to audit is high, so will the auditor increase his audit work or decrease? I need answers in one word, increase or decrease. Quickly. Increase. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So why the auditor is identifying and assessing any risk related to the financial statement or the related internal controls? Because he needs to decide his extent of checking. Because he needs to decide his substantive procedures. And before this, he needs to decide his test of controls. You all have gone through these terms in your chapter number 3, and I'm assuming that all these concepts are very clear to all of you. ठीक है? So risk क्या होता है? We have understood that it is something negative. Assessment क्या होता है? It is evaluating or estimating. क्यों कर रहे हैं auditor assessment of the risk associated with financial statement? So that he can decide कि later on how much work he has to do while conducting the audit. ठीक है? Now my next question. In which standard is it mentioned that the auditor needs to identify and assess the risk? You all have came across this essay in chapter number 2. This is a hint to all of you. Quickly, I need replies. In chapter number 2, you all have, in a line, you all have studied about this essay. So I'll wait for another 10 seconds and then I'll, yes, absolutely correct. Karthik, Sriram, Manoj, and what is this name? Rajan. Hana, the last name is Rajan. You all are absolutely correct. SA 315. Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. This essay contains the responsibility of an auditor with respect to identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. And most of our discussions that we'll be having today, this will revolve around essay 315, which in detail I'll be taking up in the second half of this session. Okay? So quickly tell me, I have told you abhi 4 things. Risk in layman language, what is risk? What is assessment in layman language? Why the auditor assesses the risk associated with the audit of financial statement, and where the requirement to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement is mentioned. So these are the 4 things that I've told you. And the 5th one is whether you have understood the meaning of the general meaning of risk assessment. Quickly, a yes or no from your side. Then we'll proceed further with the first topic of this chapter. Quickly, I need answers. So the first topic is what? Audit risk. Ab audit kya hota hai? This I'll not repeat. I'll repeat the definition very, very quickly because this definition is very important. Audit is what? An independent examination of financial information of any entity, whether profit-oriented or not, irrespective of its size and legal form, where such an examination is conducted with a view to express an opinion thereon. है ना? Audit तो अब आपको सबको पता है ना? You all have done this in detail in chapter number 1. है ना? Right? So audit अब हमें पता है, and we also know that what is risk in a layman language. ठीक है? Now, with respect to the financial statements of any organization, what do you understand that risk can be? ठीक है? So उसके लिए first of all let us try to understand the term misstatement. Okay? And in order to understand this term, let me just give you an example. For example, our client ABC Limited, it is a company, and it purchased plant and machinery worth rupees 2 crores during the year under audit. Okay? So if the company has purchased plant and machinery, the company should have debited such amount to the plant and machinery account. However, the company debited such amount to the P&L account, right? Instead of debiting the plant and machinery account and then charging the depreciation to the P&L, the company debited the entire amount as repair and maintenance to the P&L account. Now, this is a mistake, or I can say this is a what? Misstatement. Something has been stated incorrectly. Misstatement. Something has been stated incorrectly. And students, this can be due to fraud or this can be due to error. Now, fraud is what? It is intentional. Maybe employees collusion is there. Error can be what? Human error can always be there. So what is meant by misstatement? So if you will see the definition that is given, it says that it is the difference between the reported financial statement item. So the reported financial statement item is what? The entire amount has been debited to the P&L by way of repair and maintenance. So what is reported vis-a-vis what is required for that item as per the applicable FRF. What was required? The plant and machinery should has been debited by 2 crores and depreciation should have been charged to the P&L. Okay? So the difference between what has been reported by the organization vis-a-vis what should have been reported as required by the applicable financial reporting framework. है ना? तो वो क्या होता है? That is our misstatement. है ना? Just try to break it. Any statement which is given incorrectly. Okay? So that is called misstatement, and now you all know it can be due to fraud or it can be due to error. Fraud is what? Intentional mistake, and error is unintentional mistake. Okay? Now this is a misstatement. Okay? And let us assume that this, considering SA 320, what is the name of SA 320? Quickly, I need answers. I'll keep on testing your, whether you have actually taken advantage in the last sessions or not. You all have done this essay in detail in your chapter number 2. What is this essay? SA 320. Quickly, I need answers. Quickly, I need answers. SA 320. So it is materiality in planning and performing an audit. We as an auditor, we are concerned with material misstatement. Na? Itna to clear hai because you have done SA 320. Now continuing with my example. So this was the misstatement, and considering that it is material. Now in this situation, quickly tell me, what is the situation? That there is a material misstatement. 2 crores should have been debited to the plant and machinery account. However, the company has debited it as repairs and maintenance to the P&L account. Okay? Now, this is what material misstatement. Quickly tell me, what kind of opinion should auditor give? Listen to the options. Option 1, that financial statement reflect the true and fair view. Option 2, that financial statement do not reflect a true and fair view. In very simple words, I've given you 2 options. Material misstatement है. Auditor को कैसा opinion देना है? Option number 1, financial statement reflect a true and fair view. Option number 2, financial statement do not reflect a true and fair view. Quickly, I need answers. Correct. Many of you are saying that option number 2 should be the option, should be the opinion. So what was my query? I'll repeat it again. ठीक है? Just a minute. ठीक है? So what was my query? I said कि material misstatement is there. I hope you all can see my screen. Material misstatement is there. So I gave you option number 1, that what should be the opinion. Financial statement reflect a true and fair view. Financial statements do not reflect true and fair view. And fair view. So many of you are saying option number 2 is the appropriate opinion. Hana? So I can say this opinion in this situation is what? Inappropriate. Is what? Inappropriate. Hana? So this is something unpleasant. This is something dangerous when the financial statements are actually materially misstated, but the auditor is giving an inappropriate opinion that the financial statement reflected true and fair view. This situation, that when the financial statements are materially misstated, then the auditor gives an inappropriate opinion. What will be the inappropriate opinion here? That financial statement reflected true and fair view. This is nothing but audit risk. Students, don't cram the definitions. Definitions are really very, very important. Try to understand the concept. I guarantee you that you will be able to, grasp the definition after understanding, and that will not take more than a minute. I've told you that this kind of opinion is inappropriate. Hana? So let us try to derive the definition of audit risk. So it is a risk that the auditor gives an inappropriate audit opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. बताओ, इसमें कुछ tough है? अच्छा, please enlarge the screen. I'll do that. ठीक है? Students, these notes will not be uploaded. So who all are asking, I cannot upload these because these are very rough notes. Hana? I keep on writing whatever comes to my mind in the session. So you can always take a note of whatever you feel you feel important, and see whatever I'll write in red. Hana? So whatever you will see on my screen in red, that is just the dictionary meaning. So you, as such, you need not, learn it or write it again and again. Okay? So you will see I'll be using red color a number of times. That is all the examples or the meanings, the general meanings of the terms. Okay? So you can take notes from the screen. Okay? So what we have derived the definition of audit risk. That is, it is the risk that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. Okay? So now Dhanlakshmi is saying, ma'am, what is meant by inappropriate? Okay? We will try to understand each word of this definition one by one. So see, audit risk, it means the risk. Ab risk to ab aapko pata hai na, something unpleasant. A situation involving exposure to danger or something unpleasant, that the auditor gives an inappropriate opinion. What is meant by inappropriate? What is meant by inappropriate? Not suitable or proper in the circumstances. Hana? Not appropriate in the given circumstances. देखो इस वाले, in this example, what was the situation? कि plant and machinery was there, which should have been debited. Instead of that, P&L को debit कर दिया, है ना? So in the given circumstances, this opinion is not appropriate. Okay? So let us have a look at the definition again. It means the risk, something unpleasant, that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. Now you all know that we as an auditor, we are concerned with material misstatement. Why you all know? Because you all have covered SC 320 in chapter number 2. Misstatement, you all know, it can be due to fraud, it can be due to error, and it is the difference between what the reported amount vis-a-vis what should have been reported as per the applicable financial reporting framework. So Dhanlakshmi, I hope your query as to what is inappropriate is clear. So basically, what is inappropriate? Not suitable in the given situation. Hana? So in our example, in the given situation, which the situation that I gave you, an opinion that financial statement reflects a true and fair view is not suitable. It is inappropriate. And the risk that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated is called audit risk. Okay? So quickly send in your replies whether you have understood the term audit risk. कुछ mistake है financial statements में which is material, still the auditor is giving an opinion that financial statement reflect a true and fair view, or he is giving an opinion which is inappropriate in the given situation. ठीक है? I need your replies. Dhanlakshmi, you also reply whether your doubt is clear. ठीक है? So many of you are saying clear. ठीक है? So we have done what? Audit risk abhi tak. ठीक है? And today we'll be discussing inherent risk, control risk, detection risk, risk of material misstatement. So be with me. Have patience, listen with concentration, and keep on posting your queries. उसके बाद rest is on my part to make you understand, to make everything crystal clear. ठीक है? I assure you, but yes, I need your support. ठीक है? So students are saying, Sonika is saying understood and remembered, ma'am. Very well explained. Thank you, Sonika. And I'm happy that you are able to learn also. ठीक है? Okay, done. है ना? So audit risk, we have seen the definition that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. Now, how to learn? Just go back to this example. Just bring this diagram in your mind. You can make your own diagram, है ना? And try to derive the definition. ठीक है? Now, students, audit risk is a function of risk of material misstatement and detection risk. है ना? अभी you won't be able to understand this, but I assure you that later on, जब सारे risk we would have discussed, I'm sure that you will be master of this equation. What is this? Audit risk is equal to risk of material misstatement multiplied by what? Detection risk. ठीक है? So अभी तक we have done audit risk. Now let us do all other kind of risk. ठीक है? Now just concentrate on this example. See, suppose these are the financial statements of our client. This part, the financial statements of the client for which I as an auditor am going to conduct the audit. Okay? Now you must have studied in your 12th or foundation that financial statements might have mistakes which can be due to fraud or error. Hana? Let's take an example. For example, I'm going to conduct the audit of ABC Limited. And when I discussed with the management, I got to know that just a minute, that ABC Limited is my client. I discussed with the client and I got to know that the purchases, the sales, and various major transactions of ABC Limited are in foreign exchange. है ना, बाहर है सारे customers out of India. So foreign exchange is used for making payments, for receiving the payments with respect to goods sold, exported. है ना. Now I analyzed it and I realized that there can be exchange rate fluctuation risk associated with the financial statements of my client. It might be possible now that either intentionally or intentionally wrong exchange rate has been used. It can be intentional, it can be unintentional. Or let's take another example. My client, it is having major of the cash transactions, and students, you all know that cash transactions are riskier vis-a-vis the transaction through banking channel. So as such, the financial statements of my client ABC Limited in this case are in themselves very risky. They are associated with a risk which is inbuilt in the financial statement itself. Major transaction foreign exchange में होता है ना, तो the very nature of the financial statement is such that if wrong exchange rate is used, then the financial statement may contain a mistake. So such risk is inbuilt, or it is born within the financial statement. Financial statements financial statements ka nature is such that they may contain a mistake. Abhi we are not talking about any internal control. We are not talking about any audit. अभी हम क्या कह रहे हैं, financial statements ही ऐसे हैं that they might contain a mistake. Another example, suppose complex calculations are there. For example, calculation of estimates, provisions, management judgment is involved. It becomes riskier. So the very nature of the financial statement is such that the risk is inbuilt in the financial statement. So such kind of risk is called what? Inherent risk. Inherent risk. So I can say, ये जो मैं red में mark कर रही हूँ ना, which is associated with the financial statement itself. Financial statement में ही खुद से जो risk है, that is called what? Inherent risk. It might be possible that few assertions in the financial statement are riskier. For example, I gave you example of what? Complex calculation. Estimates हैं. They tend to be riskier as compared to the other assertions of the financial statement. So such kind of risk is what? Inbuilt. What is the dictionary meaning of inherent? Inbuilt. Or inborn. जो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट के साथ ही आता है, उनका नेचर ही ऐसा है दैट दे टेंड टू बी रिस्कियर. रिस्कियर का क्या मतलब है? दैट देयर इज मोर चांस ऑफ व्हाट? मिसस्टेटमेंट, व्हिच कैन बी ईदर ड्यू टू फ्रॉड और ड्यू टू एरर. सो सच काइंड ऑफ रिस्क इज कॉल्ड व्हाट? Inherent risk, which is inherited by the financial statement, which is inbuilt in the financial statement. Clear? अभी अच्छे से और समझ आएगा. एक जस्ट टेल मी वेदर एक लाइट आइडिया मिल गया आपको एज टू व्हाट इज इनहेरेंट रिस्क. रिस्क विच इज इनबिल्ट इन द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट बिकॉज ऑफ द वेरी नेचर ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स, है ना, जो उनकी ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं, दे आर सच दैट दे आर रिस्कियर. ठीक है. सेंड इन योर रिप्लाईज. इनहेरेंट रिस्क का एक वेग आइडिया मिल हैव यू गॉट अ वेग आइडिया एज टू व्हाट इज इनहेरेंट रिस्क? सो मिली, सिद्धार्थ, मेनन आर सेइंग यस. सो ये क्या हो गया? इनहेरेंट रिस्क. एंड अभी आई हैव नॉट टॉक्ड अबाउट व्हाट? इंटरनल कंट्रोल और ऑडिट. ठीक है. अच्छा, टेल मी, who is responsible for preparation of financial statements? Ma'am, we all know management. So this risk can be controlled by whom? those who are preparing the financial statement. मतलब कौन? Management. ठीक है? Very clear. ठीक है. ठीक है. So you are saying हो गया. ठीक है. ये मैनेजमेंट वाला पॉइंट आई रिपीट अगेन. अब इतना क्लियर हुआ ना. इनहेरेंट रिस्क अराइजिंग फ्रॉम द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट इनबिल्ट है, इनबॉर्न है. ठीक है. नाउ let us try to understand the other kind of risk. Now management is responsible for preparation of financial statement. Now we as an auditor, we are assessing the risk क्योंकि we need to conduct the audit of such financial statement, है ना? But when management is preparing the financial statement, management must have also assessed such risk. And in order to reduce such risk, management, these are my financial statement, management must have designed certain internal control in order to reduce such risk. Now, what is internal control? I am expecting that you all are clear because you have understood the concept in your chapter number 3 of internal control. Okay? So when management finds that there is a risk, management will implement what? Internal control. Management will implement what? Internal control. Tell me, for example, management finds that with respect to the financial statement, traveling expenses, management finds that a number of traveling expense voucher are being given by the employees for reimbursement. So management finds that there are chances of mistake. It can be due to fraud, it can be due to error. It might be possible that fake traveling bills are given by the employees. So management imposes an internal control on it. What is internal control? That any of the traveling expense exceeding rupees 50,000 will be signed, will be passed by 2 authorized signatories. Okay? So this is the internal control. Now students, tell me, it might be possible now that on some occasion one authorized signatory is not present and employees, they come together and they are like, okay, one authorized signatory say we will pass it now. So they are not abiding by the internal control. Na? Internal control implement hua hai, but it is not been followed. And it may not be followed by the employees intentionally or maybe unintentionally. So the failure on the part of the internal control to prevent or detect and correct any mistake, any misstatement is what? Control risk. देखो, जब हमने inherent risk किया, तब तक we did not talk about what? Internal control. ठीक है. अब मैनेजमेंट ने क्या किया? फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स के ऊपर इंटरनल कंट्रोल इंप्लीमेंट किया. बट यार इंटरनल कंट्रोल के भी तो इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस होते हैं ना. द वे यू डिड इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस ऑफ व्हाट? ऑडिट. तो इंटरनल कंट्रोल की भी तो इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस हैं. इट माइट बी पॉसिबल दैट इट इज नॉट 100 प्रूफ and in fact it will not be 100% error free. Why? Because human error can always be there. Collusion among employees can always be there. So a risk that the internal control is not able to prevent or detect and control a misstatement which is material is nothing but what? Control risk. Failure of what? Internal control. So I can say so suppose this was the internal control implemented by the management. So this risk is called what? Control risk. Control risk, that is a failure on the part of internal control which has been implemented by the management. Failure in what? Failure in preventing or detecting and correcting a material misstatement. है ना. पहले तो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में कुछ इनबिल्ट रिस्क है. इनबिल्ट chances हैं of what? A misstatement which can be material. So that is called inherent risk. अब financial statement के ऊपर जो internal control लगाया, that is also not 100%, that is also not able to prevent or detect and correct all material misstatement. That is called what? Control risk. ठीक है? Now students, in financial statements are prepared by whom? Management. Internal control are designed, implemented and maintained by whom? Management. Tell me, who can control such risk? Option A is management or option B auditor? Quickly, I've told you that financial statements are prepared by whom? Management. And some risk is inbuilt in the financial statement. Then internal controls are implemented by the management and some risk is associated on part of what? Failure of internal control. Tell me, who can control such risk? Management or auditor? So many of you are saying management, which is absolutely correct. So we as an auditor, we as auditors, we cannot control such risk. है ना? Because financial statement तो management ने prepare कर दिया ना, internal control तो implement कर दिया ना, उसके बाद we will be conducting the audit ना. So we as auditor, we cannot control the inherent risk or the control risk. So what we can do, कुछ तो करना है ना in risk का, because we are conducting the audit of these financial statements only. So we as an auditor, we can just identify and assess what? Inherent risk and control risk. है ना? We can only identify and assess risk, such risk, inherent risk and control risk. ठीक है? इतना clear है? बताओ, quickly बताओ, इतना clear है? What is inherent risk, control risk, and ये वाला बात that we cannot control this risk. ठीक है? Now students, risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk. See, risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk. Risk, अब आपको पता है क्या होता है? Material you know because of SC 320 and misstatement also you know. That financial statement में कुछ mistake है, misstatement है, plus the related internal controls are not able to prevent or detect and control all the material misstatement. A combined assessment of inherent risk and control risk is nothing but risk of material misstatement. If you remember, what was the name of SC 315? So the name of SC 315, just a minute, is identifying and assessing. I told you now, we as an auditor, we cannot control this risk. We can only identify it. We can only assess this risk. What? The risk of material misstatement. And now you all know that risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk. Auditor को, as per SC 315, auditor has to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. कैसे करना है? Through understanding the entity and its environment. है ना? ये वाला part we'll be doing later on. In fact, SC 315 will be doing later on. अभी our concentration is on what? The risk. तो audit risk समझ आ गया था. I started my session with audit risk, which is the risk that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. ठीक है? Then we saw that audit risk is a function of risk of material misstatement and detection risk. Risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk. Then we saw inherent risk क्यों आता है? Because some risk is inbuilt in the financial statements itself. है ना? And control risk क्यों आता है? Because there can be failure on the part of the internal control. ठीक है, to prevent or detect and control what? The material misstatement. A combined assessment of these two risks is what? Risk of material misstatement. इतना समझ आता है? Khushi, what is your query? Send it again. See, management can always, concentrate on the areas which are more riskier. है ना? अगर मैनेजमेंट को लगता है that estimate calculation is there, so management can always see that such calculation is done properly. है ना? Whose query was this? Khushi, is it clear? So risk of material misstatement is a function of what? Inherent risk and control risk. इतना समझ आता है? ठीक है. Now students, when auditor comes, he assesses that what is the risk associated with the financial statements. Then he assesses that what is the risk associated with the internal control. ठीक है. Thereafter, once he has assessed the risk of material misstatement, auditor will decide his extent of checking. Anna, if you remember, I asked you a question that if the risk of material misstatement is high, quickly send in your replies again with respect to this query. Will the auditor increase his extent of checking or will he decrease it? If auditor identifies and assesses that risk of material misstatement is high, so what will be the next course of action? What will he do? Will he increase his checking or will he decrease his checking? Increase. ठीक है. Many of you are saying increase, which is correct. ठीक है. Now students, just a minute. We have seen that audit risk is a function of risk of material misstatement multiplied by what? Detection risk. ठीक है. अब what we are doing, we are trying to understand what is detection risk, है ना? And we will try to learn all this definition by this simple explanation. ठीक है. Now, if you remember, you all have done inherent limitations of audit in chapter number 1. And there was a line that says that audit risk cannot be eliminated. Audit risk cannot be eliminated. It can be reduced. It can be reduced to an acceptably low level. Remember? Okay. Now, what is audit risk? That the auditor will give an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. Okay. And we all know that it cannot be reduced to zero. Zero to nahi ho sakta. Okay. It can be reduced to an acceptably low level, and in fact, every auditor will endeavor to bring audit risk to the lowest possible. कि कम से कम रिस्क हो that he gives an inappropriate opinion. See, it cannot be eliminated. Zero नहीं हो सकता. Why? Because inherent risk रहेगा ही रहेगा. लो और हाई. कंट्रोल रिस्क रहेगा ही रहेगा. डिटेक्शन रिस्क रहेगा ही रहेगा. इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल दैट इसमें से कोई भी एलिमेंट बिकम जीरो. है ना? फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में एरर तो आ ही सकता है ना, वेदर ड्यू टू फ्रॉड एंड एरर. इंटरनल कंट्रोल के इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस की वजह से कुछ ना कुछ रिस्क विल ऑलवेज बी देयर. है ना? तो दीज कैन नॉट बी रिड्यूस टू जीरो. सो ऑडिट रिस्क कैन नॉट बी रिड्यूस टू जीरो. इट कैन बी रिड्यूस टू एन एक्सेप्टेबली लो लेवल. एंड आई टोल्ड यू दैट ऑडिटर विल ऑलवेज ट्राई टू ब्रिंग ऑडिट रिस्क टू एक्सेप्टेबली लो लेवल. ठीक है. नाउ when auditor knows, when he has identified and assessed the risk of material misstatement to be high, I asked you whether he'll increase his work or he'll decrease. You said he will increase his work. Okay? Now, students, when the auditor has to bring audit risk to an acceptably low level, quickly tell me, if the risk of material misstatement is high, auditor will keep his detection risk high or low? Just try to solve this equation. Risk of material misstatement multiplied by detection risk is your audit risk, है ना? Risk of material misstatement already high है, ऑडिट रिस्क को लो करना है तो डिटेक्शन रिस्क को क्या करना पड़ेगा? हाई और लो? हाई और लो? So auditor will try to keep it low. ठीक है? Now रुको, यहाँ पे many of you are not answering it correctly. Let me just take you to the diagram again. What we have understood that the risk in this yellow area is what? Inherent risk, जो financial statements में inbuilt होता है. Risk in this pink area is what? Control risk, which is because of the failure of the internal control. Now, this risk is what? See, financial statements का risk पता चल गया, internal control का पता चल गया. Now auditor comes into picture. Now audit comes into picture. The risk that the audit is not able to detect all the material misstatement. The risk of non-detection by the auditor is what? Detection risk. The risk of what? Non-detection of the misstatement. See, there are inherent limitations of audit, na? है ना? Fraud है. So auditor might not be able to detect it. है ना? Considering the nature of audit procedures, remember inherent limitations, considering the nature of financial reporting, timeliness, remember? So it might be possible that auditor is not able to detect all the misstatement. The audit procedures that he has applied, by those audit procedure, all the misstatements are not detected by the auditor. So such kind of risk is called what? Detection risk. Such kind of risk is called what? Detection risk. When I talked about inherent risk, when I talked about control risk, I told you that management is responsible for preparation of financial statement. Management is responsible for design, implementation and maintenance of internal control. So these kind of risks are in the control of what? Management. Now, when auditor is not able to detect these misstatements, quickly tell me, who can control detection risk? Is it the auditor or is it the management? Is it the auditor or is it the management? That equation part whereby I asked you regarding detection risk, I'll repeat again. Abhi answer my this query that financial statement में risk था, वो inherent risk था. कंट्रोल प्रिवेंट नहीं कर पाए, वो कंट्रोल रिस्क था. ऑडिटर डिटेक्ट नहीं कर पाया, वो क्या है? डिटेक्शन रिस्क. नाउ इन whose hands, who can control detection risk? Quickly send in your replies. Who can control detection risk? So Hitesh, Sonika, Rajan, Ayush, Kaveri, Bindu, Sai, Akash, Neel, Mayur, you all are saying auditor, which is absolutely correct. Okay? And I told you that audit risk is a function of all these risks: inherent risk, control risk and detection risk. अगर financial statement में mistake ही नहीं है, let us go back to this equation. Just concentrate on this equation. If any of these elements become zero, audit risk will be zero. Na? This is a multiplication sign. So audit risk भी तो zero आ जाएगा ना. But that is not practically possible. Na? So audit risk is a function of inherent risk, control risk, detection risk. अगर मान लो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में देयर इज नो मिस्टेक, जीरो मिस्टेक, तो ऑडिट रिस्क होगा? नहीं होगा ना. Because what is audit risk? That auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. तो materially misstated तो है ही नहीं ना, financial statement में कोई risk ही नहीं है, which is not possible. है ना. Same way, controls 100% effective है, which is not possible. Why? Because of inherent limitations of internal control. तो control risk cannot be zero. And again, detection risk can also not be zero. Why? Because chances can be there. बेशक बहुत minute chances हो, but it cannot be zero. So therefore, audit risk will be there and it cannot be reduced to zero. Yes, auditor can reduce it to an acceptably low level. ठीक है. अब एक vague सा idea मिल गया है what is inherent risk, what is control risk and what is detection risk and how they become audit risk. ये वाला जो equation है, I'll be doing this again with you. And formal technical definitions of all these risks from your module. Now we'll be doing that. But before that, quickly tell me कि what are different kind of risk. एक rough idea मिल गया है या नहीं? This is just a rough idea. उसके बाद we'll be doing this in formal language, whatever is mentioned in your module. ठीक है? Quickly send in your replies. So Hitesh Kartika saying clear. I need 1 or 2 more replies, then I'll start. Send in your replies. ठीक है. ठीक है. Now let me just take you through the module. Yes, ma'am, got the rough idea. Detection risk, I'll repeat it again, Dhanalakshmi. Just wait, be with me. So let us go to the module now. I hope you all can see the module on the screen. So what is audit risk? Quickly. So audit risk means the risk that auditor gives an inappropriate audit opinion. ठीक है. अब सबको पता है what is risk, something unpleasant or dangerous. What is inappropriate? Which is not suitable in the given situation. है ना. When the financial statements are materially misstated, keywords, see these are the keywords. How to learn the definition? These are the keywords. Now materially, now तो you all know that misstatement के साथ you will always prefix what? Material. Because we as an auditor, we are concerned with what? Material misstatement. है ना. Thus it is the risk that the auditor may fail to express an appropriate opinion in an audit assignment. During the audit of a company, if financial statements of that company are misstated and those misstatements are material, then there will be a risk that audit opinion given by the auditor regarding the audit of that company would be incorrect. This example beautifully explains this concept. Strength Limited purchased a plant and machinery for rupees 2 crores in the financial year 2021. The accountant of Strength Limited debited rupees 2 crores in the repair and maintenance in the P&L account instead of taking it to the PPE and claiming the depreciation. What is this? This is a misstatement. ठीक है. While auditing the accounts of the company, the auditor did not notice this. Now, what is this? This is audit risk that consequently did not report anything regarding the plant and machinery. Therefore, opinion given by the auditor would be what? Inappropriate, resulting in audit risk. Okay? Students, if you try to see now, see, this is what? Audit risk. And once we have understood the concept of inherent risk, control risk, detection risk, like I'll be taking you through the module, you will be able to derive the three kind of risk from this example. ठीक है, अभी के लिए try to understand this is what audit risk, that the auditor is giving an inappropriate opinion. ठीक है, audit risk is a function of what? Risk of material misstatement and detection risk. What is risk of material misstatement? Now, come back to this. If you remember, I told you that inherent risk कब होता है? जब financial statements have been prepared by the management. अभी auditor has not come into picture. Control risk कब होता है? When there is a failure on the part of the internal control to prevent or detect and correct the material misstatement. So I can say a combined assessment of inherent risk and control risk is what? Risk of material misstatement. So can I say that a risk prior to audit, अभी audit start नहीं हुआ है ना, ये तो inherent है ना, inherent in financial statement which is called inherent risk, a part of internal control which is called control risk. So any risk of material misstatement, any risk that the financial statements are materially misstated prior to audit, auditor was not in the picture abhi tak na, audit hota ya nahi hota, such kind of risk would have been there. Financial statement में तो risk होता ही ना, controls, internal control detect नहीं कर पाते, ये भी तो होता ही ना, auditor का तो कोई role नहीं है ना. So what is the definition of risk of material misstatement? It is defined as the risk that the financial statements are materially misstated prior to audit. Very, 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 very important. Prior to audit. अभी auditor has not come into picture ना. Auditor ने तो कुछ नहीं किया ना इसमें. Financial statements का खुद का nature था. Internal control का खुद का nature था. दोनों को किसने बनाया? Management ने. So prior to audit. Try to learn the definition here only. Risk that the financial statements are materially misstated. Every risk will have these words, materially misstated, है ना? That, but here it is what? Prior to audit. क्योंकि financial statement किसने बनाया? Management ने. Internal control किसने implement किया? Management ने. Auditor का there was no role, है ना? So risk that the financial statements are materially misstated prior to audit. It consists of two components. What are those? Inherent risk and control risk. Now, what is inherent risk? The susceptibility. What is meant by susceptibility? You can write, if you want, tendency to be affected by something. Just a minute. I'll write it here. What is susceptibility? Tendency to be affected by something. ठीक है? And what is the dictionary meaning of term inherent? It is what? Inbuilt, or you can say inborn. Financial statements के साथ ही ये inbuilt है ना? ठीक है? Yes, easily affected. Ayush, you are absolutely correct. ठीक है? So the susceptibility of an assertion. Now you all have done the topic of assertion in chapter number 3, whereby you have already done that assertion can be of three types: class of transactions, account balance, and disclosure. है ना? So अभी के लिए I'll miss this. ठीक है? For your better understanding, the susceptibility, tendency to get affected, किसका? Of an assertion to a misstatement that could be material either individually or when aggregated with other misstatements. ये वाला line you will find in every kind of risk. Misstatement है जो कि material है either individually or when aggregated with other misstatement. ठीक है? Before consideration of any related internal control, very important. Risk of material misstatement क्या होता है? Audit से पहले जो भी risk है. Inherent risk क्या होता है? Related internal control से पहले जो भी risk inbuilt hai within the financial statement, that is called what? Inherent risk. Before considering any related control is what? Inherent risk. Clear hai? Is it clear? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your reply. Students, I hope you all are able to understand, है ना? मीनिंग समझ आ रहा है, लर्निंग कुछ हो जाना चाहिए अभी क्लास में, एंड बाकी once you give a thorough reading to this chapter. ठीक है, तो मैंने स्नेहा, आस्था, हितेश, कार्तिक, प्रभास, पोथिना, मेनन, धनलक्ष्मी and Nagalakshmi, all are saying it is clear. ठीक है, so what is inherent risk? It is the susceptibility of an assertion. Susceptibility is what? The tendency to get affected to a misstatement that could be material either individually or when aggregated with other misstatements before consideration of any related control. Control की अभी बात नहीं हो रही ना, because this is what? Inbuilt. This is what? Inborn. ठीक है. And if you remember, I told you when I was discussing that diagram with you na, that inherent risk can be higher for certain assertion. For example, complex calculations, है ना, calculation of estimates, है ना, or cash transaction vis-a-vis banking transactions through banking channel. So it can be higher for certain assertion, it can be lower for other assertions. ठीक है. Further, students, see, it might be possible that, let's say, for example, for a mobile company where technology plays a very important role. So if the company is not getting technologically updated, the products might get obsolete, which may have an impact on the going concern also. So there can be certain business risk which influence the inherent risk. देखो, financial statements, for example, mobile company है, technology enhancement हुआ, but my client is not able to upgrade its technology. Products obsolete हो गए, sale reduce हो गई, might have an impact on going concern, है ना? However, the financial statements are not prepared. These are not prepared as per liquidation basis, है ना? So in that way, financial statement will be what? Materially misstated. So there can be certain external factors which influence the inherent risk. ठीक है. Now, quickly tell me, I have told you why auditor will assess the risk. Remember when I started the lecture, now I'll be able to know whether you have listened to this lecture carefully with concentration or not. ठीक है, कैसे? Tell me, why will an auditor assess inherent risk? Inherent risk क्यों assess करना है? मैनेजमेंट ने बनाया ना फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट, मैनेजमेंट देख लेगा, मैनेजमेंट ने तो उसके ऊपर कंट्रोल्स लगाने हैं. ऑडिटर को क्यों आइडेंटिफाई एंड असेस करना है? तो मेनी ऑफ यू विल से ठीक है, बिकॉज 315 ऐसे 315 में मेंशन्ड है. ठीक है, और बताओ, why will auditor assess कि financial statements में कितना mistake है? What is the risk? After assessing the inherent risk factors ना, कि ये सब risk हो सकता है, foreign exchange fluctuation rate का देखना है, auditor will consider it in designing the test of controls and substantive procedures. After assessing that what kind of inherent risk factors are there, auditor will then decide upon with respect to what test of controls, what substantive procedures he need to perform. Auditor, for example, auditor is identifying and assessing the risk with respect to the financial statement, inherent risk. Auditor finds that there are a number of complex calculations in the financial statement. So with respect to those financial statement, auditor will go for detailed checking na. Usme he may not perform test of control. He will go for what? Substantive procedures only. So he will, yes, absolutely correct. Bindu is saying to plan his work. ठीक है, absolutely correct, है ना? And what planning? That test of control कैसे करने हैं, है ना? Substantive procedures कैसे करने हैं? Clear? And students, even if with respect to any of the inherent risk, suppose any inherent risk with respect to particular assertion is low, auditor will not ignore it. Auditor will try to understand what is the reason. Low है, ठीक है, but reason तो देखना पड़ेगा ना. What is the reason for such risk? है ना? When he will assess this, when he is deciding as to what test of controls and what substantive procedures he has to perform. So inherent risk का concept was this much in your intermediate syllabus. You will be doing this chapter in detail in your finals also. ठीक है? तो अभी के लिए बताओ मेरे को whether this inherent risk topic, whereby I told you that what is inherent risk, the susceptibility of an assertion to a misstatement, that could be what? Material, either individually or when aggregated with other misstatement before consideration of related control. ठीक है? Then we saw, अच्छा ये जो सब मैंने बोला है ना, it is mentioned here that it may be higher for some assertions. ठीक है? And related classes of transaction, for example, complex calculations. Business risk may influence inherent risk like technological developments. ठीक है? And these factors are considered while designing test of controls and substantive procedures. जब पता चल जाएगा कितना inherent risk है, कौन कौन से factors है, तब भी तो planning ठीक से होएगा ना, with respect to what? Test of control and substantive procedure. And even if the risk is low, Hana, see, it is mentioned, it is important to consider the reason for each identified inherent risk, even if the risk is lower, when auditor designs test of control and substantive procedures. ठीक है? Quickly tell me, inherent risk समझ आया सबको? कोई doubt है? And I hope you are also able to know as to how you are supposed to learn the definitions. And learning is not difficult, provided you first understand the concept in entirety and just, try to visualize the notebook or the book wherever you write the keywords or whatever you write. Siddharth and Manera are saying, ma'am, here. Okay. Now, what is control risk? So, control risk is a risk that a misstatement could occur in an assertion about, again, class of transaction, account balance, and disclosure. This is exactly the same. That could be material, either individual or when aggregated with other misstatement. ठीक है? Will not be prevented or detected and corrected on timely basis by the entity's internal control. So what is it saying? A risk that a misstatement could occur in an assertion will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis by the entity's internal control. So basically, this definition is referring to the failure on the part of internal control. ना? कि internal control कोई भी misstatement, अच्छा, Hiril is asking, ma'am, why word assertion is mentioned. See, what is assertion? You all have done in chapter number 3. So, कोई भी misstatement होगा. Assertion is what? Any of the item of the financial statement ना, उससे related existence, completeness, ये सब पढ़ा है ना आपने chapter number 3 में. तो उसी में तो misstatement होगा ना. So that is why the term assertion is mentioned, that any misstatement of a particular assertion, measurement गलत है, of a plant and machinery. So measurement of a plant and machinery is what? Nothing but assertion. So that is why the word assertion is mentioned. ठीक है? So a risk that a misstatement could occur in an assertion and that will not be prevented or detected and corrected. See, in first place, the internal control should be able to prevent the mistake. पहले तो प्रिवेंट करना चाहिए ना, चलो प्रिवेंट नहीं कर पाया, वो हो जाता है बिकॉज ऑफ इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस ऑफ इंटरनल कंट्रोल, तो एटलीस्ट डिटेक्ट एंड करेक्ट तो करे ना, कि डिटेक्ट कर लिया एंड करेक्ट. फॉर एग्जाम्पल सी इन मॉल्स है ना, यू मस्ट हैव सीन मेटल डिटेक्टर्स आर देयर, और लेट्स से सीसीटीवी कैमरास आर देयर है ना. what are those are also what a part of internal control only na, implemented by the management of the mall है ना. So first of all though, when the CCTV cameras are installed, no one should steal anything, so it should prevent them है ना. but उसके बाद भी अगर कोई stealing कर लेता है तो it should detect it, वो capture होना चाहिए ना, and correct. Are you able to understand this? Prevent or detect and correct on a timely basis by the entity's internal control. That is called what? Control risk. In other words, internal control is not sufficient enough to stop from happening or find and rectify. या तो stop from happening करें, and if it happens, then internal control is failing from finding it and rectifying it in a appropriate time, in appropriate time. ठीक है. Now my question to you, see, when we are trying to understand control risk, what we are saying, it is basically failure on part of internal control, ठीक है, to prevent or detect and correct. Now listen to this query, my question to you carefully, and please answer it correctly. If the efficiency of internal control is high, tell me control risk will be high or like it will be more or less? Efficient and sorry, internal control are efficient. Efficiency of internal control is high. Tell me whether control risk will be high or low. Quickly tell me. What is control risk? Failure on the part of IC. But I am saying IC अच्छा है. So whether control risk will be high or less. Students, I am telling you that this chapter na, students find it very difficult to understand the equations, to understand the different type of risk. But I assure you that if you listen to this lecture with concentration, answer to my queries, you will be able to grasp each and every word that is mentioned in your module. So absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Mili, Manoj, Prabha, Sandeep, Sneha, Ayush, Kiran, Sonika, Khushi, Prateek, Ayush, Dhanalakshmi, Kanu, Sri Nagalakshmi, Siddharth, Hitesh, Astha, Khushi, Karthik, absolutely correct. You all are saying less. Okay? So if efficiency of internal control is more, control risk is going to be less, and if efficiency of internal control is less, control risk is going to be high. So I can say there is an inverse relationship between efficiency of internal control and the control risk. So this is mentioned here, that there is an inverse relationship. If efficiency is high, control risk is going to be low. If efficiency is low, control risk is going to be high. Okay? Now it says that, in other words, control risk is a function of effectiveness of design, implementation and maintenance of internal control by the management. Who is responsible for design of internal control? Management. Design कर लिया, उसके बाद implement कौन करेगा? Management. Implement कर लिया, उसके बाद maintenance कौन करेगा? Management. है ना? So remember this word, design, implementation. I'll complete this control risk wala topic before the break. Then at 7:30 we will take a break. Design, implementation and maintenance. Okay? So control risk is a function of effectiveness. How effective is the design, the implementation, The maintenance of internal control by whom? Auditor? अरे नहीं मैम, by management. ठीक है. And students, internal control can only reduce, it cannot eliminate the risk of material misstatement, है ना? Why? Because there are inherent limitations of internal control. Internal control भी तो management ने implement किया है ना, तो management भी तो कर सकता है ना कि उसको follow ही ना करें. For example, let me give you an example. Rest will be discussing this in detail when we'll be doing inherent limitations. देखो, हमने example क्या discuss किया था कि traveling expenses है, तो जो भी इसका bill है exceeding ₹50,000 that will be approved by 2 signatories. ठीक है. अब traveling bill का reimbursement का MD का bill आ जाता है, voucher आ जाता है. Now tell me, if one of the signatories is on leave, management might say ना कि MD का bill है यार, एक one signatory से ही पास करवा दो ना. So inherent limitation है ना, collusion है, human error है, management में override these internal control ना, management ने ही तो लगाए हैं ना internal control, तो management को पता है ना कैसे उनको break करना है ना. So that is why internal control can only reduce, it cannot eliminate the risk of material misstatement. ठीक है. Auditor assess क्यों करता है control risk? बताओ. हमने पढ़ा इनहेरेंट रिस्क क्यों असेस करता है? बिकॉज ऑडिटर को कुछ प्लान करना है. व्हाट वाज दैट प्लानिंग? टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल एंड सब्सटैंटिव प्रोसीजर्स. ठीक है. नाउ टेल मी, व्हाई इज ऑडिटर असेसिंग कंट्रोल रिस्क? ठीक है. वन ऑफ द रीजन इज SA 315 में मेंशन्ड है. ठीक है. अब बताओ और क्यों करना है? क्यों करना है? बिकॉज ऑडिटर विल नाउ डिसाइड, ऑडिटर is assessing control risk कि कितना effective है what? Internal control. So auditor will see now whether he will rely on the internal control or whether he'll not rely on the internal control. He is basically determine what? That what will be his audit strategy. कैसे करेगा? यार, if auditor is relying on the internal control, he needs to be sure ना that actually internal control are working properly. ऐसा तो नहीं है that जो let's say authorized signatory वाला हमारा example है 50,000 above, that such rule is applicable only for 2 months, April and then March. In the 10 months such rule is not been followed, so auditor will assess that na, then only he'll be in a position to say whether he's going to rely on the internal control of the organization or he's not going to rely on the internal control. Clear? Clear? ठीक है. So many of you are saying कि मैम सब कुछ समझ आ रहा है, बट अब थोड़ा सा ब्रेक दे दो. तो आई डू वन थिंग, सिंस कंट्रोल रिस्क में अभी देर आर अ नंबर ऑफ टॉपिक्स विच आई नीड टू डिस्कस, है ना. सो आई होप ये बताओ इतना क्लियर है वेदर टू रिलाई और नॉट टू रिलाई. कैसे करेंगे? जब इंटरनल कंट्रोल को असेस कर लेंगे. व्हेन कंट्रोल रिस्क, द इफेक्टिवनेस ऑफ द डिजाइन, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन एंड मेंटेनेंस ऑफ इंटरनल कंट्रोल को असेस कर लेंगे. तो स्नेहा और कार्तिक ने पहले ही लिख दिया दैट मैम इट्स क्लियर, प्लीज गिव अस अ ब्रेक. ठीक है. सो प्लीज अदर्स ऑल्सो send in your replies whether you have understood अभी तक जितना भी किया है, and in the break try to go through, I think we have done only 2 pages अभी तक, तो try to go through these pages, and here we will take a break of 10 minutes and then we will restart our session. ठीक है. So taking a break of 10 minutes here. So welcome students after the break. I hope you all are back, and I can see there are messages. Radhika is saying, ma'am, everything is clear till now. Then Nagalakshmi, you are asking me to use more English. I'll do that, but I'll see whatever I'm saying in Hindi now. I'm repeating that in English, है ना? So I'll make sure that whatever I say in Hindi, I'll be repeating it in English again. ठीक है? And again, I'm saying I cannot upload these notes. Why? I'll be uploading the descriptive type questions, the MCQs, है ना? Case scenarios, everything. But these notes cannot be uploaded. Since I'm getting a number of queries from your side with respect to these notes, students, please try to understand that I make these notes in a language that is understandable to me. Hana? And then I explain you the concept using these notes. So if I upload these notes, these might create confusion in your mind because I use a number of short forms here. So it is better that while attending the lectures, you take notes, and afterwards also you can refer to the videos later on YouTube or whatever app is there, and you can make your own notes. And I am sure that whatever notes you will make on your own, that you will remember more easily. Okay? And again, understand and then make the notes. So this will benefit you more. Okay? And Tanishk is saying, respected ma'am, I want to ask that auditing pronouncement ka karna hai ya nahi? See, there is auditing pronouncement book which is available on your website also. So students, these modules are the base. Hana? So jitna bhi essays ka reference is given in these modules, you have to do those essays in jitna bhi diya hua hai, utna hi karna hai. Auditing pronouncement, if you feel you have time, you can go through them. Otherwise, consider these modules as a base. In the modules, whatever reference has been given, if only the name of essay has been given, you do that only. Okay? So I hope, Tanishk, your query is clear. Okay? So now we'll start. So we were discussing control risk. I asked you a question that initially you answered to my reply that inherent risk क्यों study कर रहा है auditor? Why is he identifying and assessing? Why essay 315 says identify and assess such risk? Because we have understood that auditor needs to plan what his test of control, his substantive procedures. Okay? Now my next question was why auditor assesses control risk? Because auditor has to see whether to rely on internal control or not. See, सीधा ही थोड़ी ना auditor will rely on internal control and go for sample checking. Yeah, auditor is giving an expert opinion. He cannot just rely on internal control like that without checking it. So auditor will first assess. He'll take an assessment, and if control risk is very high, that is internal control are very less effective, then auditor will not waste his time in checking internal control. He will straightforward go for substantive procedures. Auditor will adopt this strategy that I'm not going to rely on internal control. I'll not waste my time. See, if auditor decides that he is not going to rely on internal control, so is there a point for auditor to recheck the internal control? एक रफ आइडिया ले लिया ना ऑडिटर ने while identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement under SA 315. वहां पे ऑडिटर assessed that internal controls are very bad. He will not rely. So why will he check the internal controls again in detail? He will not do that. Okay? So that is why auditor will assess the control risk. Okay? Now students, while assessing the control risk, what all auditor needs to consider? So abhi ke liye na, we will discuss this topic, but students, we will be doing a topic later on that what are the components of internal control. Wahan pe you will be able to understand this topic with much clarity. I'll be repeating this topic, but abhi bhi, so that a flow is maintained, I'll take you through this topic. So while auditor is assessing the control risk, what all auditor needs to consider? what is this? Just a minute. What all auditor needs to consider? See, suppose one internal control is there. I'll take the same example. That traveling bill का कोई भी voucher आता है ना of the employees for reimbursement. So if it is more than 50,000, it will be signed by two signatories. It is what? It is a kind of internal. It is an internal control on the traveling expenses. Okay. Now what happens is there is a traveling bill voucher which is to be traveling voucher of the MD of the company which needs to be passed and for which the payment is to be made. And the authorized signatories, two signatories, one of them is not present, he is on leave. So management says that no, we cannot hold the voucher of the MD. You do one thing, just pass this bill on signature of one authorized signatory. So there is not a culture of honesty that is prevailing in the organization. When the management itself is not abiding by the internal control, why will the employees follow the internal control? So when the auditor is assessing the control risk, okay, so he will be considering what? The effectiveness of design, implementation, maintenance of internal control. Internal control को तो देखना ही है. But along with that, auditor will consider the control environment. What is the control environment? The environment within which that internal control is implemented. If that environment is not full of honesty, integrity, if management is not exemplify that nahi, dekho, we are also following it, employees will also have to follow it. Will the internal control be followed? No. So when the auditor is making a control risk assessment along with assessing the internal control, the effectiveness of design, implementation, maintenance of the internal control implemented by the management, auditor will also consider the control environment having the influence over the internal control. जिस environment में internal control को grow किया है, internal control also needs an environment to grow. Na? Management is not following it. Why the employees will follow it? Hana? So the control environment. What is control environment in detail? We'll be discussing in the next session. Okay? Okay? Then when the auditor is making a risk assessment, control risk assessment, the auditor will consider the related IT processes. I'll explain this to you again with the help of an example. For example, the traveling bills are passed through electronic, maybe some mails or some online accounting software is there. Okay? For which two authorized signatories are given password and user IDs, they can authorize such vouchers. Now tell me, if the computer system in which such authorization and everything happens, if the general password ID of such computer system, anyone can use it, that ID password is not secured enough. Tell me, if the general IT processes are not efficient, will the internal control be effective? If everyone is having the user ID, the password of such system, anyone can enter, anyone can log in, anyone can authorize it. So auditor will have to see the related IT processes also. Okay? So this is the second point. I'll quickly do this topic, but I'll be repeating it once we have done all the components of internal control. Okay? Now, what is called significant classes of transaction? So with respect to significant classes of transaction, let's say calculation of provisions, let's say research and development expenditure, R&D. So auditor will not only just rely on internal control with respect to those transactions. He will consider that whether he needs to perform substantive only is that he needs to perform substantive procedures with respect to those transactions. So when auditor is making a control risk assessment, he will consider the control environment. Because internal control को भी तो effective होने के लिए एक environment चाहिए ना. If that environment is not good, internal control cannot be effective. Related IT processes. ऐसा ना हो, internal control तो बहुत अच्छा है, but anyone can enter it. Anyone can, override all those internal controls. Significant classes of transactions. If number of transactions are high, auditor may go for only substantive ना कि test of control, internal control पे थोड़ी ना rely कर लोगे आप for significant classes of transaction, your high risk transactions, है ना. For example, I told you R&D expenditure, internal control उस पे नहीं देखोगे ना आप, substantive checking करोगे उसके लिए. And expectation of operating effectiveness, ठीक है. Management has implemented an internal control system, है ना. But ये भी तो देखना है ना whether it is operating effectively or not. Auditor has seen that ठीक है, in the factory area CCTV cameras are installed, but auditor will have to see ना whether those cameras are actually working throughout the year. ऐसा तो नहीं है that when auditor comes then only they work. ऐसा तो नहीं है that they work only in the month of April, they work only in the month of March, उसके बाद the CCTV cameras are not working. So operating effectiveness भी तो auditor will have to see now with respect to what? Internal control. समझ आता है? Control risk assessment में auditor will see internal control, है ना. देखो यहाँ पे हमने क्या पढ़ा था, that it is a function of effectiveness of design, implementation, maintenance of internal control by the management. But along with that, auditor will also have to see that, consider na that internal control is a flower. It needs an environment to grow. So whether that environment is been given to internal control or not. Related IT processes hai ya nahi. Significant classes of transactions ke liye auditor may give for only substantive checking, and auditor will see the operating effectiveness, whether it is actually working throughout the year or not. Okay? So let's say when the auditor is assessing the control risk, he identifies deficiencies. Okay? I'll just ask you a query. When auditor was assessing control risk, he identifies deficiencies. Now tell me, will auditor rely or not rely? This is A or B. Either write A or B or write rely or not rely. He identified deficiencies. Let's say that traveling bill जो है ना, he found that at many instances ना, it has been approved by one signatory. और जो seniors के है ना, वो तो seniors they themselves sign it, approve it, and the payment is made. So obviously he will not waste his time on checking the internal control ना, he will not rely. है ना? Students, you must have done in essay 315, in essay 330, है ना? All these concepts that auditor, what he'll do, he will first identify and assess the risk. The risk of material misstatement, which is associated with what? Inherent risk and control risk. Now, when auditor is assessing the control risk, and yahi pe if auditor finds that controls are very, very bad, they are not effective, then auditor will not perform test of control, na? Why will he waste his time? He will not perform test of control. However, if here auditor finds that there is no deficiency, that the internal controls are good, then he will again check the test of control in order to see कि ठीक है internal control तो है, effectively work कर रहे हैं या नहीं, throughout the year है या नहीं. Clear? हाँ, तो you are absolutely correct, and I'm so happy that 100% answers are coming correct, which means that you all are able to understand the concept. ठीक है? So obviously he will not rely ना. ठीक है? And suppose if he identifies a deficiency with respect to an internal control, with respect to a particular assertion, or you can say item of the financial statement, and then he finds that with respect to this particular assertion, other controls are also implemented. है ना? Other controls are also implemented. For example, with respect to this traveling ना, auditor finds that authorized signatory को sign करना है physically on the voucher. But auditor feels कि यहाँ पे deficiency है, क्योंकि seniors के जो है ना, वो seniors खुद ही sign कर देते हैं, they sign it by themselves. ठीक है? But auditor finds that there is another control. That first this traveling voucher will be signed by two signatory, then it will be entered into the accounting software, which is again secured by password, and that is only given to one person. An auditor is satisfied with this control. The auditor was not satisfied with this control, but he's satisfied with the other control on the same assertion, then auditor can rely on such control. So basically, see, what is this? This is basically the professional judgment of the auditor now. If he feels that considering all the relevant controls on the assertion that he's checking, if he finds that all the controls taken together are okay, they are effective, he will rely. And if he feels that considering all the internal controls, or let's say there is only one control which has a deficiency, he will not rely. And from this, I want to tell you one more topic, that see, all this assessment is what? A matter of professional judgment of the auditor. Auditor को लगता है rely करना है, deficiency इतना नहीं है, he can rely. It depends upon auditor's professional judgment ना. Auditor को लगता है कि he should not rely, है ना? He'll make his audit strategy that okay, I'll go for detailed checking, I'll go for only substantive procedure. This again is his professional judgment. So students, can I say that assessment of risk of material misstatement is a subject matter of professional judgment of the auditor. कुछ कैलकुलेशन थोड़ी ना हो जाएगा प्रिसाइज कि इतना मेजरमेंट कर लिया, नहीं. इट इज अ मैटर ऑफ प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट ना, विच मे बी डिफरेंट फॉर वन ऑडिटर, विच मे बी डिफरेंट फॉर द अनदर ऑडिटर. ठीक है, मैटर ऑफ प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट. क्लियर? ठीक है. So we were discussing that अगर control deficiencies are identified, if control deficiencies are identified, he will test more than one control for each relevant assertion. I gave you example of traveling. कि traveling में authorized signatory का जो signatures है in physical form, that is जो voucher पे signatures है, that control is not working effectively. Then he found that only by signature of authorized signatory the bill is not passed. उसके साथ क्या होता है, accounting software में some entries to be done, which is a very good control. So if it supports his professional judgment that he can rely, so he will rely. If otherwise that he feels that the other internal control is also not good, he will not rely. As simple as that. If deficiency is there in an internal control and this is the only control identified for an assertion, so he will not rely. Simple. Anna, simple, very simple. Let us just quickly go through the module. Okay? So control risk, the risk that a misstatement that could occur in an assertion. Assertion, you all know, class of transaction भी हो सकता है, account balance भी हो सकता है, disclosure भी हो सकता है. That could be material, either individual or when aggregated, will not be prevented or detected and corrected. I hope this or and here and is clear to you. या तो control should be able to prevent it, that no one is stealing because cameras are implemented. ठीक है, पर अगर ऐसा हो जाता है, suppose there is a power failure, है ना, so it should be able to detect and correct it. How? Maybe some inverter system should be there, so it should be able to detect it and correct it on a timely basis. One of you were saying, ma'am, why timely basis? See, everything is required on timely basis ना. आज कोई mistake हुआ है, next year पे पता चलेगा, so that is equivalent to कि आपको पता ही ना चला हो, है ना. So on a timely basis by the entity's internal control. And we have seen that there exists an inverse relationship between control risk and efficiency of internal control. When efficiency of internal control of an entity is high, control risk is low, and vice versa. You can go through this example. Misstatement we have done, that it is the difference between the amount, classification, presentation, disclosure. That is basically what assertion, reported financial statement item, and the amount that is required for the item to be in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. It can be due to error or it can be due to fraud. Clear? Then I told you that assessment of risk is a matter of professional judgment. Simple है, ठीक है. It is not capable of precise measurement. Precise का क्या मतलब होता है? Quickly send in your replies. Accurate. ठीक है. Now we will do one thing. Control risk को भी we will have a look at this. Control risk is a function of effectiveness of, I told you, DIM. design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control by management. However, internal control can reduce but not eliminate risk of material misstatement in the financial statement by because of the inherent limitations. ठीक है. So what inherent limitations? Human error होना चाहिए. Human error can be there, mistakes can be there. ठीक है. Now why auditor is assessing control risk? Because he needs to see whether to rely or not to rely on control. Dhanlakshmi, I'll repeat. Wait, पहले concentrate on this topic. Auditor assesses control risk in order to see whether to rely or not to rely on the controls. So what all he needs to consider? The control environment having influence on internal control. Hana? Then he will see the related IT processes. I gave you example of what general IT controls. Then approach over SCOT, significant classes of transactions. I gave you example of what? Research and development expenditure or estimates. है ना, उसमें ऑडिटर में opt for substantive procedures only. ठीक है. Expectation of the operating effectiveness based on understanding of entities process, that is whether they are operating effectively or not. ठीक है. Control risk deficiencies, you can read it as a homework. I have told you that if there are deficiencies, so he'll see whether other controls are effective or not, and if they are effective, then he may go for a rely approach audit strategy. On the other hand, if he feels that deficiency is there and that is the only control on the relevant assertion, then he may change his assessment to not to rely. And it all depends upon what? Auditor's professional judgment. And this paragraph says that essay 315 talks about what? Combined assessment. In essay 315, now students, you will find that the term uses risk of material misstatement. If you remember the name, identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So auditor will have to make a combined assessment of risk of material misstatement following the preferred techniques, methodologies, or practical consideration. So our ultimate objective is what? He has to identify the risk of material misstatement. See, the need for the auditor is to make appropriate risk assessment. That is more important than the different approaches. Approach koi bhi ho, but any approach may be taken by the auditor, whether to rely, not to rely, but he needs to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. So we have seen that risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk. So we can say audit risk is a function of inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. Okay? So are you able to understand? See, what can go wrong? See, it basically says that with respect to a particular assertion, there is a query of Sri Lakshmi and Karthik. Okay? So when auditor has identified a deficiency in the internal control, ki control risk is there. So auditor will then assess its impact, that what can go wrong, kya galat ho sakta hai because of this deficiency. So with respect to each assertion, each relevant control, auditor will assess what can go wrong. He will assess that because of this deficiency in the internal control, what is the impact? What is the magnitude of misstatement that can happen? Okay, Karthik, Shri Nagalakshmi, whether it is clear or not. Okay. Now, professional judgment point is done. Okay. Let me just take you back to that equation. Okay. Now I'll ask that question, jiska many of you answered it incorrectly at that time. Now let me see whether you all have understood it or not, because now we have done audit risk kya hota hai, inherent risk kya hota hai, control risk kya hota hai, detection risk kya hota hai. Okay. Ab try to understand audit risk. This is very interesting, very important. So please be with me. Okay. So inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. And now we know that this is what risk of material misstatement, which has been referred by essay 315. Okay? So I'll write inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. Tell me, with respect to Inherent risk. Just a minute. Just a minute. Tell me, what can auditor do with respect to inherent risk? Auditor can just assess it. Control risk, auditor can assess it. Auditor क्या करता है? Assess करता है. ठीक है. Control risk को भी assess कर सकता है. And detection risk को क्या कर सकता है auditor? Auditor can frame it. Auditor can control it. ठीक है. I'll explain, Hiral, I'll explain risk of material misstatement at 2 level. Wait. ठीक है. Just a minute. So now my next question. Tell me, inherent risk is at the level of management or auditor? Inherent risk is at the level of management or auditor? Quickly, I need answers. So, absolutely correct. Sneha, check your answer. Inherent risk, since financial statements are prepared by management and inherent risk is arising out of financial statement, these are at the level of management. So that is why auditor can only identify and assess the inherent risk. Same way, tell me, control risk is at the level of management or auditor? Yes, Neha, now you are correct. So, control risk is also at the level of management. Why? Because management is designed, implemented and maintained the internal control. Na? Auditor can only what? Assess the control risk. Now, detection risk. Tell me, detection risk is at the auditor's level or management? Detection risk. Detection risk. What is this risk? Ajay, we have not gone through the formal definition of this risk now. So what is this risk? The risk of not detecting a material misstatement. By whom? By auditor. Absolutely correct. So Karthik is saying my level. He has already started considering himself as an auditor, which is very good. ठीक है. So it is what? Auditor level. ठीक है. And you know that these two risks are what? Risk of material misstatement, which is what? Prior to audit. Correct? So these will stay irrespective of whether audit is there or not. Irrespective of audit, no? Hana? So inherent risk, which is at the management level, which auditor can only assess. Auditor cannot control this risk. Auditor cannot control this control risk. He can only assess it. Hana? Why? Because these risks are there irrespective of the audit. Okay? Now, students, I asked you that if risk of material misstatement is high, what will auditor do? Will he leave the audit assignment? No. He will increase his level of work, of audit work. He may take a larger sample size. उसको दिख रहा है ना that there is a risk of material misstatement which is high. He'll go for extensive checking. He may go for substantive checking only. All depends upon what? Auditor's professional judgment. All depends upon what? Auditor's professional judgment. Okay. Now, since we know that audit risk, which is a function of risk of material misstatement, which is not in control of auditor. Okay. So auditor cannot do anything with respect to this. Okay. So what I'll do is, just a minute, I will mark it. That auditor cannot do anything with respect to risk of material misstatement except for identifying or assessing it. Okay. See why I'm making you understand this, because after this discussion, you'll be able to learn the definition of detection risk by heart. I assure you, but yes, okay, you will also have to assure me that you are listening with concentration. So audit risk is a function of risk of material misstatement, which is beyond the control of auditor, and detection risk. Okay. Now we all know that audit risk cannot be reduced to zero, but auditor will always try to bring it to an acceptably low level. Okay. Now tell me, if auditor knows that the risk of material misstatement is high, this is a multiplication sign. Okay, students? Understand this and then answer my query. The risk of material misstatement is high. He wants to reduce the audit risk. Tell me, will he keep his detection risk at high or at low? Why I'm asking you this question? Because this detection risk is framed and controlled by auditor. Auditor risk of material misstatement ka to assess karne ke, except for assessing it, auditor cannot do anything else with that. Na? Auditor can frame and control what? Detection risk. Now, in order to reduce the audit risk to an acceptably low level, knowing that risk of material misstatement is already high, tell me whether auditor will keep the detection risk at high or low. Sneha, Sudhanshu, please check your answers. Quickly. Simple equation. Na? You want to reduce the audit risk. You want to bring it to an acceptably low level. Risk of material misstatement you cannot control. It is constant. Basically, it is constant for you. What you as an auditor can control? Detection risk. So, in order to make sure that audit risk is reduced to an acceptably low level, auditor will keep his detection risk at low. That means that the chances that any misstatement gets undetected, remains undetected, should be low. And how will that be possible? By increasing the level of work, na? By choosing larger sample, by going for extensive checking. Hana? So auditor will perform the audit procedures in such a way that in order to reduce the audit risk to an acceptably low level. Is it clear? Is it clear? Yes, DR needs to be kept low. Kaveri, you are right. Prabhas, you are right. Dhanalakshmi, you are right. Akash, Neel, Sneha, Manoj, Kaveri, you all are right. Kiran, Menon, you all are right. When the right hand side, he want to reduce it. He notes that one of the parameters which is available on the left hand side, he want to reduce it. And he know that one of the parameters that is available on the right hand side is already high. So he will try to reduce the other component of this equation. Okay? Now let us have a look at the definition of detection risk. So see, the risk that procedures, that means audit procedures, performed by the auditor, why? To to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. ठीक है? What is the ultimate objective of the auditor? To reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level, है ना? But still there is a risk. So the risk that the procedures, which procedures performed by the auditor to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level, will not detect a misstatement that exists, that could be material either individually or when aggregated with other misstatement, is what detection risk. Whatever audit procedures auditor performs, the purpose is to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. While performing those procedures, or those procedures are not able to detect a misstatement, rest all is same what, which is material, either individually or when aggregated with other misstatements. This is called what? Detection risk. And a combined assessment of all the three risks, inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk, it gives rise to what? Your audit risk. Clear? So audit risk is what? It is a function of inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. Inherent risk and control risk are not in the control of the auditor. So in order to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level, what is the option available to reduce detection risk? And what does it mean? That he will increase his level of audit work. ज़्यादा work करेगा ना, ज़्यादा चीजें checking करेगा ना, so detection risk can be reduced. See, it cannot be eliminated. Why? Because there are inherent limitations of audit. तो eliminate तो हम किसी को भी नहीं कर सकते. Inherent risk को भी zero, we cannot reduce inherent risk to zero. Management cannot reduce inherent risk to zero. Management cannot reduce control risk to zero, and auditor cannot reduce detection risk to zero. So audit risk to zero नहीं हो सकता. I told you earlier also. It can be reduced, and for us, for we as auditor, how we can do it? By reducing the detection risk. And how? By performing audit procedures, that is detailed checking करके ही we can reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. So the definition of detection risk, I'll take you again to the definition. Risk that procedures performed by the auditor is performing the procedure to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level, will not detect a misstatement that exists and that could be material either individually or when aggregated with other misstatements. So I hope it is clear. Now one or two topics are left in between. So we have done that risk assessment is a matter of what? Professional judgment. Auditor will apply his professional judgment. If auditor feels that internal controls are effective, he'll rely. If he feels that internal controls are not effective, if according to his professional judgment, the internal controls are not effective, he'll not rely. So it is a matter of what? The professional judgment. Okay? Then I told you that the combined assessment is been referred by SA 315. Okay? And this we have seen. Now one topic is left, that auditor needs to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement at two levels, at the overall financial statement level and at the assertion level. And this was a query also of one of the student. Okay? Before starting with this topic, I would like to ask you, and I want all of you to reply, that whether you have understood or not. And Sneha is already saying that, ma'am, everything is clear. Now rest also, please send in your replies so that I can move further, whether everything is clear. And students, here I would like to tell you that we will be covering each and every topic from the module, but you will be getting a more, a crystal clear understanding if after the session you go through the module in entirety, and whatever examples, whatever illustrations are given up, please read them, because they beautifully explain the topic that is mentioned. Okay? So read the entire module in entirety. Entirety means you need to read each and every line. Okay? Now So Dhanalakshmi is saying everything is crystal clear now only. ठीक है. So to make it more crystal clear, you need to go through the module. Dhanalakshmi. ठीक है. Please go through the module. It is a very humble request to you from my side. Okay. Now, risk of material misstatement at two levels. Auditor needs to consider, he needs to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement at two levels. Okay. What is meant by that? Just a minute. Let me just have a look at your query. See, Karthik, risk of material misstatement refers to the risk prior to audit. Hana? So this essay 315 talks about what? Risk of material misstatement only. Okay? And Sushil, what is assertion? Now you tell me, because chapter number 3 you all have already done. Whatever is represented by the management in the financial statement, whether it is explicit or otherwise, whether it is explicit or implicit, is assertion. Hana? If management is saying plant and machinery is worth ₹2 crores, so management is asserting, is representing that plant and machinery worth ₹2 crores is there. It actually exists. Hana? The measurement is correct. Clear, Sushil? You can just refer to the lectures of chapter number 3 and it will be clear to you. Yes, Manoj, it can vary. Sushil, for assertion, please refer to chapter number 3 and otherwise, like I have given you an idea about what assertion is. Whatever information is given by the management in the financial statements is what assertion. And we as auditors, we check those assertions only. Okay? Yes, Manoj, I have told you that it may vary from auditor to auditor. Okay? Now, what? We were talking about two levels. Okay? So, when the auditor is identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, he needs to consider it at two levels. What does that mean? That auditor will see whether a particular misstatement has an impact on the financial statement as a whole. That means on many assertions, many items of the financial statement, whether a particular misstatement is having impact on many assertions or the entire financial statement as a whole. Okay? This is first level. And second is, at assertion level, what is the impact? On a particular assertion, what is the impact? Let me explain this to you with the help of an example. Okay? Karthik, for combined assessment, I mean combined assessment of inherent risk and controlled risk. Okay? So, misstatement, let's say that auditor assesses, he identifies and assesses that the financial statement of the client ABC Limited, major transactions are in foreign currency. Foreign currency. Okay? Now, tell me, if a wrong exchange rate is used, it is going to impact the entire financial statement now, or many assertions, many items of the financial statement will get affected. The purchases will be wrongly valued, Hana? The sales will be wrongly valued. It might be possible that machinery is purchased from its import. The machinery is also imported, so machinery valuation will also be wrong. Purchases will be what? Measured wrongly. Sales will be measured wrongly. The machinery is valued wrongly. Hana? So as such, this misstatement is having an impact on the financial statement as a whole. it is affecting many assertions. So auditor will have to see whether a particular misstatement, a particular mistake, whether due to fraud and error, it is having an impact on the financial statement as a whole. Okay? Let us look at this topic from the module. See, the risk of material misstatement, that is inherent risk and control risk, it may exist at two levels. What is this? Overall financial statement level, assertion level for classes of transaction, account balances and disclosure. So overall financial statement level का क्या मतलब है? Let us see. Just a minute. FOREIG. ठीक है? So risk of material misstatement at the overall financial statement level, it refers to the risk of material misstatement that relate pervasively to the financial statement as a whole and potentially affect many assertions. Pervasively is what? Everywhere. It has an impact everywhere in the financial statement. It is having potential. Potentially is likely to affect many assertions. So auditor will consider that also. Yes, Karthik, you are absolutely right that such foreign currency risk will impact the financial statement as a whole. Many assertions will be misstated, है ना? So auditor will consider that. ठीक है, इतना समझ आता है? Quickly send in your replies. ये समझ आया? That auditor will have to assess the risk of material misstatement at two levels. One of this is what? Overall financial statement level. What is meant by that? That whether the particular misstatement, material तो है, ये तो पता ही है ना, ऐसे 320 करने के बाद, that we are concerned with what? Material misstatement. Whether it relate pervasively, that is everywhere, it is having an impact everywhere to the financial statement as a whole and potentially is likely to affect many assertions. Quickly tell me, yes, Kushi, this is possible. I'll not tell what is your query, but this is possible. You are right. First is clear. Radhika is saying, samajh aa gaya ma'am. Siddharth is saying, first is clear. Sneha Menon are also saying, first is clear. Okay? So when the auditor is identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, how? Through understanding the entity and its environment. I'm saying what? The name of SA 315. He will have to assess it first at the overall financial statement level, whether it has an impact on the financial statement as a whole. That is on many assertions. Okay? Now, when auditor has analyzed that it is having an impact, auditor will have to now see that with respect to each and every assertion, what is the impact? पहले क्या देखा? That whether it is having impact on many assertions, that is financial statement as a whole. Now auditor knows that many assertion पर है. Now auditor will look, he will assess such risk of material misstatement on each assertion, that what is actually the impact with respect to each assertion. Why? So that auditor can now determine the nature, timing, extent of his further audit procedure with respect to each and every assertion. First of all, तो he has seen ना कि financial statement as a whole पर है impact? हाँ है. It is on many assertion? Yes, it is on many assertion. Now, with respect to each and every assertion, see what is written. See, assertion is what? Class of transaction, account balance or disclosure. This you have already done in your chapter number 3. Okay? Now, risk of material misstatement as at assertion level. First, when many assertions पता चल गया ना. Now, at all these assertions are assessed in order to determine the nature, timing, extent of further audit procedure. ठीक है, impact तो है. But now, in order to see how to respond to such risk, auditor को पता चल गया that there is a risk with respect to this misstatement on this particular assertion. Now, how to respond to such risk on every assertion? For that, auditor will see the impact on each assertion so that he can determine the NT of further audit procedures, है ना, because audit procedures तो for particular assertion के लिए होगा ना, ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता ना that auditor will perform one audit procedure for the financial statement as a whole. That is not possible na. For each and every assertion, auditor will have to perform certain procedure. So now why at assertion level auditor will have to check? Because for each and every assertion, he needs to determine the ND of the audit procedure. Why? So that he can obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Why? So that he can express an opinion how at an acceptably low level of audit risk. Okay? I'll repeat this topic. I'll repeat this topic again. Sneha from your system na, Sneha Gupta. At least 100 messages have come, blank messages. So see what is the problem in the system. Hana? So when the auditor is identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, he needs to consider it at two levels. The overall financial statement level, in order to see whether it is impacting the financial statement as a whole, and at the assertion level. Okay? So overall financial statement level means whether the misstatement is pervasive. Pervasive is what? Having effect everywhere in the financial statement, and whether it is potentially affecting many assertions. Okay? At the assertion level, it means that since the auditor has to decide the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedures that he need to perform for each assertion, so he will determine the impact at assertion level also, so that he can determine the ND of audit procedures. Why ND of audit procedures is to be determined? Because he need to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Why sufficient appropriate audit evidence required? Because he needs to give an opinion so as to reduce the audit risk to an acceptably low level. Okay? So Sneha, please check it. Abhi bhi number of messages are coming from your system, blank messages. हाँ, इसके बाद छुट्टी हो जाएगी. Who is saying? राधिका बंसल. ठीक है. तो I have given you example of what? The forex वाला example यहाँ देना. Foreign currency, it is having an impact on the entire financial statement as a whole. ठीक है. Let's say there is certain debtor balance. ठीक है. Which let's say 5,000 rupees, which has not been considered by the management. See, if some payment has been received 5,000 ka and it has not been accounted for by the management, so wo misstatement, how much impact will be there? So it will impact the debtor balance, it will impact the bank balance or the cash balance, whatever is this. So it is not impacting the financial statement as a whole, na? ठीक है? So Hiral, is it clear? There was a query of Hiral. Send in your queries, students. Are you able to understand? Dubey Sunil, please send in your query again. Sneha is saying, ma'am, it is clear. Okay? So, auditor will have to consider the risk of material misstatement at two levels, that is the overall financial statement level and at the assertion level. Okay? So, with this, we have covered till here. See this illustration now. This illustration is very good. It will beautifully clarify all your doubts if you have regarding what inherent risk, control risk and detection risk. बहुत अच्छे से समझ आ जाएगा. Or situation is given and it has been given that in this situation what is the inherent risk, what can be the control risk and what can be the detection risk. Okay? So the illustration 2 also. So please go through these illustrations, the chapter, this one till 1 we have done. So please go through the module in entirety. I don't want you to skip any illustration or example. Okay? And please just wait for 5 minutes. I'll revise the topics that we have covered. Okay? And before that, please send in your replies whether everything is clear or not, and send in your queries also so that I can just repeat it at this moment. Further audit procedures. FAP, Sushil, I have mentioned FAP, further audit procedures that auditor performs under SA 330 that you must have done in your chapter number 3. Okay? So, Dhanalakshmi, try to pick the keywords from the module, and then obviously you can use your language, but the keywords need to be picked up. Siddharth is saying now he understood after the debtors example. Okay. No, we are not doing any MCQ today. I'll be taking them in the next session. Karthik, risk of material misstatement here refers to what? Your inherent risk. You are right. Okay? So clear? Karthik, I hope your doubt is also clear. So now let us just quickly see what we all have done. So we have done the concept audit risk, inherent risk, control risk, detection risk, and risk of material misstatement. Okay? Sushil Kumar, about my CA journey, I'll just last 2-3 minutes we'll talk about this. Okay? But abhi try to understand this. Okay? Audit risk क्या होता है? It is a risk that auditor gives an inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. Hana? I gave you example of plant and machinery. You should go through these examples. Audit risk is a function of risk of material misstatement and detection risk. Risk of material misstatement क्या होता है? That is the risk that financial statement are materially misstated. तो कहीं पर भी आप now students are saying, ma'am, how to fetch good marks? See, misstatement को कभी भी लिखना है ना, तो it will have materially word before it. Because we are concerned with material misstatement. जैसे chapter number 3 में audit evidence से पहले sufficient and appropriate आएगा ही आएगा ना. ठीक है? ठीक है? So, financial statements are materially misstated prior to audit. Inherent risk, susceptibility, tendency to get affected of an assertion to a misstatement that could be material, but before considering what? Any related controls. And we saw that inherent risk can be lower for certain assertion, it can be higher for certain assertions like complex calculations. And why auditor is assessing? So that he can decide his what? Test of control substantive procedures. Even if inherent risk is lower, he will have to consider the reason why the inherent risk is there. What is control risk? It is the risk that a misstatement could occur. That could be what? Material, whether individually or aggregated, and it would not be prevented or detected and corrected on timely basis by the entity's internal control. Okay, misstatement difference between the reported financial statement item and required by the applicable financial reporting framework. It can be error or fraud, and this assessment is a matter of professional judgment. Okay? Acha, this topic is left, which I'll be taking in the next session, which is important. So this topic I'll take in the next. Risk of material misstatement, auditor needs to consider it at the financial statement level and at the assertion level. I gave you example of forex and debtor. I think usse clear ho gaya that what is meant by financial statement as a whole. What are the components? Inherent risk and control risk. Components of what? Risk of material misstatement. Control risk is effectiveness of design, implementation, maintenance of internal control by management. It will not eliminate risk. Why? Because of inherent limitation. What are inherent limitation? We'll be doing in the next session. Why auditor is assessing control risk? Because he wants to know whether to rely or not to rely on the internal control. Now, with respect to this, there is a query. Let me just go through it. So Radhika, you are correct na, that if internal controls are not effective, ठीक है, auditor को लग रहा है, auditor feels that the internal controls that have been implemented by the management, they are not effective. ठीक है? So auditor will not check these internal control in detail na. When he was identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, वहीं पे he analyzed that internal controls are not effective. So when auditor is responding to such assessment under SA 330, which you have covered in chapter number 3, so वहां पर auditor will not waste his time in rechecking the internal control. He will straightforward go for substantive checking. Why he'll not check internal control? Because his strategy is not to rely on the internal control. Radhika, I hope this is clear now. While auditor is considering what the control risk, he'll consider the control environment, he'll consider the related IT processes, significant classes of transaction, what should be the approach, and whether these are operating effectively or not. Deficiencies, we have seen that if he identifies, so first of all, see whether they are relevant other controls or not. If they are effective, auditor's professional judgment says that you can rely, so he can rely. However, if the control that he has checked is the only control and it is deficient, the auditor can always change his strategy to that he'll not rely. Combined assessment of risk of material misstatement, that is inherent risk and control risk, is required by SA 315. Okay? Detection risk is the risk that the procedures that auditor will perform to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level will not detect a misstatement that exists. That could be material either individually or when aggregated with other misstatement. And I have given you homework that you need to read this chapter in entirety till this page number 4.8. Anything else? No, Karthik, no reporting is required on such fact, because reporting is required on the financial statements only. Internal control पे auditor as such is not required to report, except for one clause which we'll be doing later on in this chapter. So I hope students everything is clear. Send in your replies whether everything is clear or not. And Sushil is saying, ma'am, please share about your CA journey. I'll do that, but in the next session, because it's already time to end the session. So I am waiting for your replies. Yes, Manoj, I am. Okay, clear? So please, it is a humble request again that please go through the module and read the module in entirety. All the examples, illustrations are supposed to be read. They are not given for any decoration purpose or, these examples, illustrations are given for your understanding only. And if you go through these examples, illustration, these will help you in answering the MCQs, the true and false in your exam with ease. Sneha, I am telling you that abhi time is not permitting. Definitely in the next session, we will discuss. Okay? So please remind me, Sneha and Sushil, we will definitely discuss this. And I hope everything is clear. Radhika is saying clear. Karthik is saying his part of learning is left, which is absolutely correct. Okay? So students, please go through the module today itself. Hana? You can study for 45 minutes after this session, or take a break and then study, go to the module. You will be able to learn the definitions. It will be just cakewalk for you people. Okay? So thank you for being patient listener. Thank you for making this session very interactive, and see you in the next session. Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. Done.